I'm Chris Gagnér, here to do my critical race theory presentation. The first thing was how, by reading Racial Identity Development Theory, has it helped me examine and understand my racial identity development. And it's something I had to think about a lot, I guess, because being white, primarily white, it's not something you really think about too much. Race doesn't play a huge factor in my day-to-day life, or at least as I see it. And that's tough because I know a lot of people will deal a lot more with challenges and stuff, and I just really don't, and I take that for granted, and I guess I always have. But I do identify also as being Native American a little bit, and with that I do see the struggle they face, but being very light-skinned, white, I mean, it's nothing I really deal with in my day-to-day life, but I do have like cultural pride with being Native. The thing that informed me about my racial identity development, I guess, was actually this class. By doing these assignments, it's been kind of an eye-opener, because with race, you don't want to, like, you just think about not being, like, have that racial hatred towards others, and you want to treat people equally. I guess that's really what I focused on in my life, and really haven't, like, built any identity through being a certain race, I guess. So in framing my racial identity, when I first became aware of my racial self, I mean, I grew up in northern Minnesota, and there's only two races in, I believe, all of northern Minnesota. Really, primarily, it's white people and it's Native Americans. And since I was both, I kind of got to dip in both identities, and so I felt like I belonged anywhere and everywhere. I felt like I could mingle with white people, be just fine. I felt like I have Native American friends, and it didn't matter to me whether they were dark or whatever. It wasn't a really too big of a factor, and so I kind of identify more through my gender, through being a male, through my culture, my interests, my just down to like just the music I like going to, with concerts and fostering in that community. So I identify a lot more through that. A time that I experienced or witnessed institutional racism, I think the biggest one is when I went to go visit my grandpa, and he lived on a reservation, and my parents would drive me down there, and we would go, and you just look around at these reservations, and I would be like, why is it so dirty here? Like, the lawns and the yards and stuff, they would be just filthy. There'd be cars everywhere and stuff like that. And my mom tried to explain to me that it was because it's just a different way of life. They don't have the type of support that we have, and reservations run on their own governments. And while, the United States does give money to Native Americans to run these reservations, the amount of support that they give them isn't enough, and there's this segregation that exists between them. And a lot of people will be super ignorant, and they'll be like, well, they get casinos and they can run their money through that, and that's how they make their money, and they have their own government, and that's really how they'll govern. But it's not enough. And so seeing that access, it's really cut off. They don't have the same, it's just not the same. They get money and then no direction as to how. It's important that they have that, because we did, well, as in we, people from other countries took their land, ancestors of ours. There's also been other situations I've seen where institutional racism has existed, when just not access to, like, when I went to a bar in the city I lived in, like a Native American was stopped, like, hey man, not tonight. And I've seen it more than once to know that it wasn't just like a, hey, we just don't want you in here because you're a nuisance when you're here. I mean, that was just kind of just flat out racism there. The event I experienced when I went to the reservation, I was in the identity versus confusion stage of Erickson's model, where you have this sense of complexity of life, merging of sensory, logical, aesthetic perception, and seeing that and how it influenced how I was growing up, I kind of empathized with how they were living, and it influenced me in that the world I saw was unfair, and maybe always there'll be like some unfairness involved, and that's tough. I mean, and so I guess it influenced me. I sought out like Native friends and stuff, and not through like any sort of not through any guilt or anything. I mean, it wasn't white guilt. It was just that I wanted to understand more. I wanted to identify with that sense of myself as well, and have, cultural pride. And I think with Native Americans, they need that. And they're Ojibwe people from northern Minnesota, they're very open people and kind, and it's tough seeing how tough of life that they have, and how, I guess, behind socially that they can be. The next thing I want to talk about was cultural race theory, and that essentially is the view that race, instead of being biologically grounded and natural, is socially constructed, and that race, it means to maintain the interest of the white population that constructed it. And so with white people creating this world to live in, they want to have that imbalance in power. They want to have this semblance of power and uphold it. And as long as we have this economic injustice and this political dominance of one race over another, we're going to see this racial imbalance. And that's not a comfortable topic for white people to talk about, because then you have to acknowledge that it's a thing, that there is this imbalance, and how do we go about fixing it. Ultimately, you have to be committed to the advancement of policies and address that diversity and inclusion, especially when you become a social worker. And that's the change I'm going to make one day, is advance policies and address diversity in the workplace, with people day to day. Just see how I can advance everybody, whatever race you're from, it doesn't matter to me. I want to help. I want to address and be sensitive to whatever cultural needs that you need, and have the advancement that everyone else does. And one day, hopefully, we will live in a United States that has a more balanced feel to it. That, I think, is all I have to say. I think I went over a little bit. Thank you for watching.